Last we saw Jason, he was dead and chained to the bottom of Crystal Lake. But once again, horny teenagers are to blame in his return. Anchoring their boat close to the camp, Jim and Susie help to unleash a new series of killings. But by part 8, what was there left to do with Jason? He had only had a cameo in the first one, if you're willing to count a dream sequence. He didn't have the mask yet in the second, and in 2 of them, he's not even the killer. We moved all around Crystal Lake, added a psychic, and closed the franchise off at part 5, the final chapter. But here we are, skipping all the smaller towns in between and hitching our way to Manhattan. Don't worry, his travels won't end there. In future installments, he's still going to visit Hell and space. Jason Takes Manhattan might not be considered the sequel that killed the franchise. He'd show up a few more times. However, this would be the last of the films that Paramount would release, as they would sell the rights to New Line Cinema, which, luckily for us, would mean Jason and Freddy could meet up in the future. Ultimately, though, it began the long fight over the rights to the franchise, and Jason would fumble through the next few decades without much direction. We'll get into that later, though. While maybe it should have been called Jason on a Boat, the 8th movie still contains all the elements we ask for in a Jason movie. A group of teenagers making poor life choices while a reanimated madman runs amok. And we get some iconic scenes of Jason walking around Times Square. But the public wanted more. Rob Hedden, the writer and director, originally went to Paramount with 2 ideas. The first idea was to get Jason out of that stupid lake, as Hedden would say, via a cruise ship. He labeled it as a little bit of Das Boot and a little bit of Aliens, with a claustrophobic feeling storm at sea, that sort of stuff. Yeah, sign me up. The second idea was New York. Everything about New York was going to be completely exploited and milked. There was going to be a tremendous scene on the Brooklyn Bridge, a boxing match in Madison Square Garden. Jason would go through department stores. He'd go through Times Square. He'd go into a Broadway play. He'd even crawl onto the top of the Statue of Liberty and dive off. Also, yes, please. I mean, there's nothing wrong with dreaming big. At least we still got some boxing. Both ideas were approved by Paramount, but Hedden decided to combine them. Man, what could have been, eh? It's probably this idea that had the most impact on just about everything that followed. We'd end up not being able to afford a cruise ship, and we wouldn't be able to have Jason diving off the Statue of Liberty. While Part 8 had the biggest budget yet, just over $5 million, it was still a lot to ask for, even if you filmed it mostly in Canada, taking advantage of the exchange rate. Vancouver and British Columbia were the primary filming locations for this movie, hence the reason I kept the maple leaf on the thumbnail to the video. Sorry, eh? Personally, even though I would take either of the 2 ideas alone, any day of the week, I still find Part 8 charming. You know, charming in that murderous kind of way. You get it. Sure, we couldn't get an actual cruise ship. Apparently the boat originally booked for filming canceled last minute, and this is what they were forced to deal with. But we still get a boat that provides that Aliens vibe, that industrial, heartless type of environment. I also feel like we get just the right amount of Jason in Manhattan. A fine line that even the Scream franchise seemed worried about. One of the producers of Scream 6, Chad Villella, has mentioned the creative team behind the film studied Jason Takes Manhattan before they had Ghostface take Manhattan. Oh, we definitely studied it, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't have a boat in this. We wanted to be in the city, in the lived-in part of New York. That was very important to us. Obviously, being in a city is a scary thing. With Woodsboro, you're able to be isolated very easily, but in a city, you can be surrounded by millions of people and still feel very alone. That's exactly what we wanted to capture with this one. Personally, I'm of 2 thoughts. First, I believe New Yorkers wouldn't put up with it. Manhattan isn't a Crystal Lake type environment. If you've ever tried to cross the street in New York, you'll know this. But also, New Yorkers see strange stuff every day. They might just keep walking thinking it's performance art or something. That's why I think the Times Square scene works so well. While I'll always mourn the individual movies that almost were, I do enjoy that in Part 8 we get both worlds, that claustrophobic trapped on a boat with a killer vibe earlier in the film, and then Even in a city of millions, we're still trapped on an island with a killer. There's a nice symmetry there. It's definitely not the best in the series, but I feel it makes up for many of its faults by giving us a wild ride. We get the saddest senior class trip, drugs, attempted seduction of a teacher, who for a moment seems quite willing, music video aspirations, father and son drama, aquaphobia, death at the disco, more drugs, a block knocked off, toxic waste, and all the while a strange backstory of Rennie being pushed into Crystal Lake as a child somehow gives her a psychic bond with Jason? So is it a good movie? Absolutely not. Is it fun? I'd argue that it's a blast. To be fair, give me Jason in just about anything and I'm happy. So, just a little biased here. Rennie, or Jensen Daggett, comes off as wooden can be, and while the childhood trauma of being pushed out of a boat as an attempt to teach her to swim is quite dramatic, it makes me want to apologize to a cousin of mine I pushed off a pier as a kid. He was wearing water wings, he's fine. I have a hard time believing it would carry so much weight later in life. I mean, she blocked it out and needed some back alley drugs to revive the memory. I don't want to be harsh, and I'm not sure if it's the writing or the acting, but Rennie can't compete with some of the other Friday the 13th final girls. Ginny, anyone? I've read a lot of online commentary that people were quite dissatisfied with the kills in Jason Takes Manhattan. I know with the franchise as a whole, the constant fighting with the ratings board had always been detrimental to these moments. I still feel we have some quality kills in this one. The sauna scene and the boxing match compete with one of my favorites, Jason in the sleeping bag, in Part 7, The New Blood. And let's not forget one of the biggest kills, Jason being ravaged by the toxic waste New York City floods the sewers with every midnight. The fact that this would seem plausible in 1989 speaks to the weight we gave toxic waste at the time. I'm from Nevada, and the fight over Yucca Mountain as a nuclear waste repository was heating up around this time. So back then, seeing toxic waste in a movie, I probably didn't bat an eye. You have that classic scene of Kane Hodder throwing up on command, and the lightning hitting the Statue of Liberty as the final Friday the 13th movie in this franchise. It's a fittingly dramatic way to go out. Recently, in September of 2023, Victor Miller, the screenwriter for the first movie, won the rights to the franchise after a prolonged legal battle. The issue, however, is, spoiler alert, Jason as we know him isn't in the first movie. Jason's a kid that drowns in the lake while the counselors are bumping uglies. So we'll see how that all shakes out in the near future. As a television show, Crystal Lake will air in 2024 as a prequel to the movies. I'm not sure what to expect. As a Friday the 13th fan I'll be watching, Brian Fuller of Hannibal fame is producing, and he's promised to bring Tom Savini back to camp. All signs are pointing in the right direction. Time will tell. I'm hopeful. And there you have it, folks. My thoughts on one of the least appreciated Friday the 13th movies, which happens to be one of my favorites in the series. Mostly for just how absolutely kinetic it's willing to be. I hope you can go watch it again and just appreciate it for all that craziness. Next time, I'll be starting a project I've been thinking of doing for a while now. A series on the werewolf movies of 1981. Hope to see you there. Thanks for watching.